Welcome back to the Balancing Act Mompreneur Edition. Today I have on Abby. She is a local photographer in my area, and we've known each other through the photography world. And now I jumped into motherhood, and now we're both moms that run businesses. So I'm so excited to have her here.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Yes. So please tell me about you because
Well,
I think it's always so interesting when I hear about what you're currently doing on top of photography.
so my background's a little strange and I always tell people like I use both sides of my brain because I'm actually a pharmacist, so a full-time pharmacist, and I'm board certified in psychiatric pharmacy. Not something that's required when you go to pharmacy school, but something that I wanted to do. And so I got into photography because during my pharmacy residency, my husband was like, "You need a hobby. Like, all you do is work." So he bought me a camera because he knew that I was artistic, like, in some way. I liked to draw, like, I had an eye for things, and just on a whim, bought me a camera. He's like, "I don't even know if you like photography." So, literally, like, just bought it for me and then was like, "Also, there are classes at the art museum. I think you should take them." I was super excited about it because I hadn't been able to do anything creative for years. Being in pharmacy school took up most of my time. Went to the art museum, took these courses on how to use my camera, and then, from there, it was, like, supposed to be a hobby, and then, you get the people that are like, "Oh, you have a camera, like, take our pictures," whatever, and at first I was like, "This is not legitimate, like, this is for fun, I don't know what I'm doing," and then I, like, thought to myself, even back then, like, "But could I?" And so it just kinda expanded from there, and, at first I was, like, shooting everything, thought that I needed to shoot everything, and quickly kinda got into newborn photography after I had my daughter. So, I always gauge how long I've been doing newborn photography by how old she is. I'm like, "Okay, Quinn's 10. It's been 10 years."
And, and say, was she like one of your
Like,
muses?
first yeah, oh my gosh, and I at some point, will have to show you some photos I took of her. I'm like, "We're just gonna hide these forever." But, so she was one of my first muses, but I remember, client that I had taken pictures of for other reasons, and then she was like, "We're pregnant, we're having a baby, like, do you wanna take newer photos?" And I was like, "Sure," because when you're a new photographer, you're like, "Sure," like, and that's how you're gonna get experience and figure out what you wanna do. And I quickly was like, "Oh my gosh, this is really difficult." Like, the baby had hiccups the entire time, and I didn't know, and I was, like, super pregnant myself,
Uh-huh.
and me being me was like, "This is a challenge, and I wanna get better at it." So, just, like, headfirst dove into it, and
And
here I am.
it doesn't surprise me because you're always the first one to try stuff. Like a new
I'm
camera
not
comes out,
scared to do that.
try. You're like, give me that new camera. I'm gonna just see if it's worth it. If
Mhm.
not, you rent them and you're just always like trying. And it's admirable because a lot of people are comfortable,
Yeah.
so they don't.
I haven't always been like that. I mean, as kids and as we grow up, we have this innate sense and fear of, but what if I don't do well, or what if I fail? It's something that over time you either overcome it or you don't. At one point in my life, once I noticed that I could do things, that was when it snowballed. I hadn't been like that my entire life, but over time, the time between me thinking about it and doing it has become shorter. So instead of being like, could I do this? And then like maybe one day and having these like, stories that I tell myself, it became less and less of a problem. And now I'm just like, but I could. And what if it's amazing? And because it's happened before and I've proven to myself that that's possible, I think that's why, I'm not afraid to try new things.
We put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Not everything.
Oh, the pressure and the expectations of being perfect. It's kind of wild, just as a mom and even just as a business owner, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't try things is they're like, it has to be perfect. I have to know everything before I try. And it's like, you don't really need to. Or, we have this plan of, well, I'll do it when, or I'll start doing XYZ when. And it's like, but why are we really waiting? Like, what's the real reason why we're waiting? Because sometimes we don't even want to face that reason, right? So
Sure.
many potentials, so many answers, so many
Yeah.
possibilities that we don't even give ourselves the chance to like figure out or try, you know? it's a sense of like protection. As human beings, we want to be comfortable. We want to protect ourselves from that failure, from that uncomfortable feeling of change, from that uncomfortable feeling of something that's different.
Mhm.
And, I think it's actually more helpful to kind of lean into that fear, lean into that uncomfortable feeling because sometimes it's like your body's way of protecting you, right? Like in an actual situation like that. But sometimes it's a potential of like, but this thing could be good for you. That's why I'm telling you you're uncomfortable. It's new. You really just need to feel that feeling. COVID hit. I was working out at home and I was working out like a lot where like almost twice a day. It was almost a little unhealthy. And I was actually on Instagram, because we're influenced by everyone. A fellow psych pharmacist had started working with a health coach. And, at that point, I was like, I need someone to help me. But my turning point was when I started to notice that I was kind of resenting my family for taking up my time and being unhealthy about it. So if I didn't get to work out, if I didn't get to do this thing, it was like, well, you're all taking up my time. And so I started like really just not acting like myself. And I didn't like that I was snapping at really stupid things, right? Like, why aren't you going to sleep? Why are you acting like a toddler? And it was like, I did not want to feel that way. And so
Right.
at that point, I decided that it wasn't just taking care of my body and my mind and making sure that that thing is separate from my family and from my business. I wanted to get to a place where I felt good about myself and I wasn't resenting everyone for what I was doing. And so I take the time for myself. That was something I had to learn was that if I'm not here for myself and present for myself and figuring out the reasons why I'm triggered, then I can't be present for my kids. I can't be present for my husband. I can't be present for my business. And so going to the gym, starting to really take care of myself, not just obsessively thinking about it, but like truly going for the right reasons. That was kind of my turning point was I need to do something about this. I can't continue just beating myself up and then resenting everyone for
And
my behaviors.
it's so good for you. I love how real you were with that. Like you were snapping at your kids, you felt resentful. I've met more people say that they've resented and been snappy than they had figured everything out perfectly. And I have also like had moments, and I'm still having moments where they're like a little snippy because I'm
Mhm,
trying to do all of these things,
mhm,
everyone else,
mhm.
and none of it's for me. And so I'm like, when do I get to do this? And because I had a conversation with my husband, I was like, okay, one day a week, I need from the hours of 3 to 7, the opportunity to book and or record for my podcast. He said, deal done. And I'm like, okay, but that's not for me, that's for work.
Yeah.
Well,
We tend to do that too. We put all these work things in or time that we get stuff done and we classify it as me time. No, no,
now great that I don't have kids bothering me, but at the same time, it's work. Like
it is
it's
work.
right, will work, but it's work. And
Right.
not like by myself or in my thoughts or moving my body in new ways. Like it's not that. So it's good to hear that like people and also for people to know like they're not alone in the resentment feeling and the anger.
It is
No one
normal. It is so
um,
normal. And I think that's usually when I start to feel myself getting, and I have learned over time from my health coach and from my mindset coach, triggers are there for a reason. When you are triggered or something is bothering you or you are being snippy, there is a reason behind that. It's not just because that's how you are. And usually you can figure out the reason. And it's so important that you acknowledge that trigger and kind of figure out the why behind it because then it's like, okay, like I have been overworking lately, right? Maybe I am getting to the gym every day and I'm eating and whatever, but like now I'm overworking. And so that's kind of when I like know okay, I need a break. I need a date night. I need a night to just sit with a book by myself and not feel guilty about it. Right. And even if my kids are here, and different stages of life too, I feel like moms tend to compare themselves. Like I've had so many moms with newborn babies, toddler children, be like, I don't know how you do this. And I'm like, okay, well, you were at a different stage in life than I am right now. And when I had a toddler and a newborn, this was not what my life looked like. I was not sleeping. I was not spending a lot of time for myself. I had some time, but not a lot of time. And so I think that's important too, to know like where you are in your stage of life, know what's actually reasonable in that stage of life and what works for you. But those triggers and me being snippy and kind of being upset about stupid little things, that's kind of when I know it is time for me to take a break. And even if it is something that's very small, not work related, again, because I do the same thing. I'll be like, oh, I have like a couple hours. I'm going to edit. That's
Yeah.
working
It's like, let's turn it off.
completely off. And I had a friend actually mention something like that to me. She was like, I had extra time and she was like, you better not do anything. She's like, and when I say do any, I mean like sit and stare at a wall. Like don't work, don't organize, don't clean, which for me is kind of like a coping mechanism. Like when I'm feeling myself get overwhelmed, sometimes I'm like, okay, manic clean, like I need to get all these things done. But she was like, seriously, just sit and stare at a wall, please. Like that, I think that's what you need.
If you're talking to a mom who is struggling to, whether it's her health, whether it's just me time, what would you say is your advice to them?
Oh, that's a great question. If someone's struggling, I think it's good to ask yourself the question of why you want to do the things that you want to do. So if you're struggling, for example, taking time to yourself. Almost always the reason is mom guilt, right? Well, I need to get these things done. My kids need me. My husband needs me, or how. But you're literally pouring from an empty cup. You have to think of it that way. And the mom guilt is there because innately, as mothers, we do care for others. Growing up, that was my mom. She was a stay at home mom. It was always about us. She never did anything for herself. Later in life, I really think she resented others for that reason. I feel like if she would have just been able to spend a little time for herself or buy herself something nice every once in a while, I don't think that things would have ended up the way that it did for her. And I kind of learned from that. Definitely not saying like, hey, peace out on your kids all the time. It's like being on an airplane, masks come down. You need to put your mask on first before you help others. If you're not able to do that, you really are just going to exhaust yourself to the point of, everyone else is going to come first. And you're going to get to a point where you're going to feel like there's a point of no return. And that's where you can really fall into a dark place. And I know a lot of moms have. So when it comes to taking care of yourself and doing stuff for yourself, I feel like guilt is the number one reason that I usually hear. And at least for myself, that was a problem for years.
Oh, yeah. More times than not, we're the ones that make us feel guilty.
Oh, we tell ourselves stories. We really do constantly. Why we can't do things, why we can't spend money on ourselves, go places, do things on our own time. We tell ourselves stories as to why we can't and as to why it just won't happen. A lot of moms do that. A lot of moms.
Absolutely. And speaking of things we tell ourselves, my segue is into setting up that you want to do this, but also going into balance. Decide you want to do this. Now, how do we balance it?
Mhm.
I know that you are very like
That perspective.
you seems like you like your schedules. You
Mm.
have things kind of laid out before they happen.
Mhm.
Tell me
So
about it.
I think one thing I like to talk about when it comes to schedules, planning, things like that is expectations. I think, and this kind of goes into the topic that we just discussed of everything needs to be perfect before we do the thing. It does
Okay.
not have to be perfect, but having realistic expectations is really important. So, whenever let's say, for example, like, with my family life, we are very regimented in that there are nights that are dedicated family nights. I do not schedule work or shoots or anything on those evenings. That is a dedicated family night. It's like a non negotiable. Like, that is a,
Yeah.
right? That's a big no. And sometimes, there's wiggle room with that. Like my husband and I, there have been nights where it's like, oh, that's not happening tonight, but maybe we could reschedule it for a different night. So we're very present with that. And then, setting up expectations of what I am getting done on other days. So again, having designated days for that and kind of making sure that I have that time set aside. I feel like a lot of people are just kind of like on the fly, like, oh my gosh, I have so much to get done. And I find myself, I think I've rambled about this on my stories before too, where it's like you just become paralyzed with
Yes.
like, you're like, there's too much. And then you just kind of sit there and you're like, I don't know what to do. And when that happens, I have to literally be like, okay, so in the forefront of my mind, like, what is something small I can get done right this moment? Whether it's emptying the dishwasher, hmm, changing my laundry, right? Something that I'm like, okay, I know it needs to get done. Let me do this one task really quick. And then it kind of can snowball from there, but also performing like brain dumps are very helpful for me, right? Where
What?
it's like if you're feeling overwhelmed or you know that you have a lot to get done, brain dump what, is currently going on in your head, whether that's, work life, family life, personal to-dos, and then kind of categorizing that. But expectations again, where it's like, okay, these things that need to get done in my house, but completely reorganizing my kids' bedrooms probably isn't going to happen, right? In the time that I have. But let's set that up as like this is on a to do for a potentially later date when I know that I have extra time. So now that is like, out of my mind. I'm now not anxious about it. And when it comes to like work, again, I just have days designated for those things, like a way that will avoid any issues. But it has worked for me over time. And I feel like having those expectations of like, okay, this is what I actually can get done versus like, okay, pump on the brakes. You just created a to-do list that no one could get done in a
Right.
day, 2 days, 3 days, right? So obviously having planners, writing things down, the brain dumps. My husband and I also share a calendar. So
Whoa. Right.
yes, so we both have Google Calendar labeled, so there's like his stuff, my stuff, and having that open communication with each other is very helpful too. So, what's feasible in our schedules, what could I do in some of the free time that I have? So,
And I feel like when I write things down, it allows me to forget it less.
yes, very much so. It's kind of like that mindless scrolling. I feel that way about electronics as well. If I have a tangible list in front of me that I can physically cross things off, I will also recommend like saying it. I have read the book Atomic Habits. I'm in my reread, so I'm second time that I am reading it, and I forgot how many little tidbits of info are in there. And one of the things is saying it out loud. You are more likely to do something and complete something if you say it out loud to yourself. Even if it's something stupid. Like this morning I had to drop off a package and I was like, okay, I need to drop off a package. And like, you could write that on a to-do list. But I was like, I'm going to take this package to the postal service to my husband. And then it was like I physically grabbed the box and it was like it happened because I said it and I like put it into play. And it sounds so stupid and like, but I think that's what it is. It's this mindless, like, mind numbing thing that we do. But if we say it out loud, we're more likely to do it.
And so speaking of schedules and non-negotiables,
Yes.
you mentioned ways that you say no as a boundary setting
Mhm.
strategy.
Mhm.
So as a busy mom, like you're doing a lot of things.
Yes.
And how do you decide when to say yes to something or to say no?
Great question. Someone said this to me once and it really stuck with me was that if I say yes to something, I'm saying no to something else. And so if I'm saying yes to work, whatever it is, I'm saying no to time with my kids, extra time to get stuff done. I can kind of sense when I know I'm a little overworked or I'm starting to allow myself to become overwhelmed because we do that, by the way. When people are like, I'm overwhelmed, well, you're doing that to yourself.
Right.
Because people always blame other things. And I'm like, no, you create it. You create the overwhelm. Deciding to say yes to something, I don't want to just say like it's based on the vibes, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, okay, this is something I truly kind of vibe with. I feel that it is something that at the time is going to give a good return for whatever reason. And I'm okay with saying yes to this thing and no to maybe this extra other time, And this kind of goes into play with the mom guilt thing, because if I say yes to photo shoots, whatever, and I'm saying no to my kids, sometimes it's a good reminder like, okay, and I have the ability to use my in laws as babysitters sometimes. If I say yes to a photo shoot, okay, on the pro side, I'm making money. Maybe I really am vibing with whatever shoot it is and I'm excited to shoot it. I'm not sitting
Um,
there like, "Ugh, I have to go do this."
right.
Because that happens sometimes. And that's when I know I'm like burnout, is when I'm like, dreading things. I'm like, okay, not good. Like, I should really
Mhm.
enjoy doing this. And that
Yeah.
goes with anything. But then, my kids get to spend time with my in laws, and sometimes they're super excited to see them. And so putting a positive spin on it is very helpful for me in like my mom guilt side of things. But really just reminding myself, if I'm saying yes to this thing, am I truly into it? Am I truly excited about it? Am I vibing with it? To say no to other things.
You know what? The vibe is definitely something you can go based off of, right? Because
Oh, absolutely.
it doesn't always have to be analytical
No. Yes.
when I say yes or when I say no.
Yes.
And I think that's so great. And I don't know if I've maybe touched on this in the past or not, but I have stopped doing weddings after this year because I no longer look forward to it. And it's
Yeah.
not because I don't, once I'm there, I'm having the time of my life. It's
Yes.
not that, well, once I get there, the vibes are good,
Yes.
but it's getting there and leaving my family and then coming home exhausted is not exactly what I want to do anymore.
No.
And when I'm there, I'm all in. I love it. I'm having a good time. But
Right.
then it's also like there's a lot to it. And then afterwards, there's even more to do.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm not doing more. And
And
that's okay.
yeah, and it is okay. It's something that I think there's such a definitive thing to it too, that some people are like, well, if I do this, quit this thing or don't do this, like it's never going to happen again. Like that's also not, it's literally part of the journey of life. There are times where I want to do this thing more so than other times. Not putting that definitive marker on it either. I am 100% a believer in energetics and knowing what's aligning and what's not. People always say, trust your gut. That is a real thing. Like, when I hear trust your gut, that is like your instinctive, intrinsic way of reacting to something. And that is a real thing. What is your first response to something? Whatever that is, it's probably the real answer.
And you've heard wild stories about people trusting their gut in situations that could have been dangerous. And then later on that they avoided like a tragedy or something that could have been crazy and devastating.
Right. And it's been proven in so many different ways.
Was there ever a moment in time when your kids made you realize you needed to set a better boundary with something?
Well, Quinn, sometimes as she's gotten older, she like pays attention a little more. By the way. What Well, I'll tell you 2 stories. So the first story, with how they're paying attention is I, meditate often, and one time, I forget, she had only been like 7 or 8. She was a little, because this was a couple years ago. Caught her meditating, like, literally listening to something on her phone, and I was like, "Wow, okay." Like, she really does watch what I do. Like, that's the only way that she would have learned that. So, they're always watching. But one time, Quinn had mentioned to me, like, "Oh, you're going to another photo shoot?" And I was like, "Oh, well, yeah." I explained to her, because there is always a healthy balance, but I explained to her, "Yes, mommy is going to a photo shoot." But I was like, first of all, I think that night they got to go with my husband, like, out to eat somewhere. So I was like, first of all, you're gonna have a lot of fun with dad. Second of all, the reason that mommy likes to work and likes to do these things is so that we can go do other fun things together, so that mommy can buy the clothes that she wants, so that mommy can, get you some of the things that you want. So explaining that, like, I don't want them to have that mindset of like work, 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 like that's the only thing that's important, but to not give up on something either. And that you kind of create your own reality. But I will say that there are times where I notice that if they bring that up, I do ask myself, like, well, am I, is this too much? Is it to the point where they're like noticing and saying something? Cause usually they're like, oh, okay, like, bye. And then if
Yeah.
they make a comment like that, I'm like, oh, I don't like that they're noticing it and that it's like significant enough that they're bringing it up. And I'll ask her, and I'll straight up just be like, is mommy working too much? What could we do in the next week? Like, let's spend time together. What do you want to do? So,
Right.
kind of having that open communication. And sometimes I'll even ask my husband too, because he notices as well. And
Right.
he's very mindful about that too, like where he's just like, I'm doing too much. I want to be home. He very much will just be like, nope, this is too much. I'm stopping for a week, So it's a boundary.
It's funny because my husband would be like, okay, you've done a lot.
Yeah.
Let's dial it back a little. He wants to hang out. And
Yes.
the, the last 2 weeks, we've been like just passing by each other
Oh, yeah.
and we did not feel good about it. So we had a date night to reconnect and it was
Yes.
good. But with the kids, we try to like do stuff
Right.
with ons, one-on-one,
Right.
hanging out, come home. I knew I had a long night of like podcasting. So I was like, I'm going to spend the morning with them. And the dream is that we can be together all the time and
Yes.
always spend,
Yeah.
finding the best solution. And here's the thing, people think that balance is like every day it's like half and half, but it's truly like making sure that you're mindful of when things are too much.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
And recognizing that it won't be like that all the time. Like there are times in our schedules and in our year, right? Where it's like, okay, well, we know in this season of the year and of our life, this is the normal. Like them being on summer break, they are with my husband a lot. They are playing their instruments a lot. They're able, we're able to go do more because of the weather. And then it's like winter, we're kind of like homebodies and like maybe we're not going and doing a bunch of things, but we're home together. And then spring rolls around and we're like going insane and like want to, get out of the house or maybe work a little more. Recognizing that it doesn't have to be constant like that all the time and allowing it to kind of wax and wane, I think.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I put the balancing act as the title of this, but it's helping people learn what balance looks like.
Is it?
And that's the biggest thing is it's different every day and it's different every family and it changes. So it's
And
like just being okay with taking things slowly.
Mhm.
And I also liked how when you talked about your to-do list and it's like lower your expectations because I started going from clean the house on my to-do list to empty the dishwasher because
Literally, yes, you have to be specific
so
or
specific.
you will lose your mind. Cause I was the same way. Like, clean the
And
house. Okay, well, where do I start? And then you end up not doing anything. And then you get mad at yourself. It's like this terrible cycle. Being
I
specific is super important.
I would say like I feel lazy. I feel like I just can't do something. But I'm not lazy. I'm just overwhelmed and I don't know where to
Right. Yes. And there are mechanisms that you can put in place to help yourself, like I said, with the expectations and with those to-do lists. I'm being as specific as possible can be very, very helpful. Like just a matter of clean the house or very specific things that I would like to see get done that I know are going to take me like 15, 20 minutes max. That's the other thing is like you tell yourself that this is going to take like so long and I'm going to waste all this time. No, actually, it's probably only going to take you 15, 20 minutes. And if you just
last.
put your phone down, right? Because we're so distracted. Put your
Yes.
phone down, put it on do not disturb. That's probably the best thing that I've done for myself when it
Uh-huh.
comes to work or even family time or when I do have a to do list. I find myself mindlessly scrolling, and that's when I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, you need to go away. Do not disturb. Goodbye for a couple hours. And setting boundaries with your times. I also set like limits on my apps. So once
Yeah.
I hit a certain amount of time on whatever it is, Instagram, TikTok, it just kind of shuts me off. And it'll say, like, hey, like, you only have this much time left. And if I notice in the day, like, oh my gosh, it's only 6 p.m. and I'm at my time limit, that's a problem. Like, you just have to set those boundaries. Don't think that any of this is going to be easy. My coach told me once, and this is such a good perspective, you have spent the last 37 years of your life being like this. Maybe not with the phone, because the phone hasn't been around that long. But when it comes to your mindset, how you're taking care of yourself, all the things that you're doing, your whole life, that is how you have been. It is not going to change overnight. And so, again, with the expectations of like, oh, I'm going to be more mindful and I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to do that and I'm going to start going to the gym every day, it's going to take time. the motivation isn't going to be there all the time either. Like you're not always going to feel, because I get that a lot too, where people are like, I just wish I had a little bit of your motivation. There are days where it is in the toilet. I don't want to do anything. I feel like garbage. I'm thinking like garbage. And I just need a second, you know?
And
And then there are days that I'm just like on top of the world. I feel amazing. I'm doing amazing. Like today was one of those days I felt great.
yeah,
And yeah, just knowing that it's going to take time and that you just need to start somewhere.
I started surrounding myself with people that also affect my mood in a better way.
Yes.
We are who's really who we want to be around.
Yep.
And always that quote, it's like you are a combination of the 5 people you surround yourself with. And it shows, right? Like, and there's
It
people that I
helps.
hang out with and I love them as people, but their energy drains.
Mhm.
I'm like, I can't be this negative. I can't hear about all these wrong and bad things all the time. I said, I need a conversation that feels inspiring and exciting.
Oh, yeah.
I did, that's, let it not be your personality.
It is. And it's human nature to kind of feel like you need to go into the doom dungeon where everything sucks and this sucks and that. Okay. And like you said, there's normal venting and there's normal feelings that you need to feel. And then there's just straight, like you said, energy draining. And it sounds like you're being super mindful about that and recognizing this is not conducive to how I want to think and how I want to act. And so you almost have to set boundaries about that too. So, there are certain people that I have interacted with, have been friends with, are related to, where it's just like, okay, I need to step away.
Absolutely. And especially if you invested into it, it's one thing if you're like naturally surrounded by it. But if you're like, okay, I've invested into this, I'm going to make sure that
Oh,
I show up the way that I actually want to. That can get you there, not faster, but like
really?
you're like holding yourself accountable in that way. Like money's tied to it, where someone else is like checking in on you. Like there's that accountability to someone else to know, like, okay, are you doing good? If you're not,
Me?
like, work through it. And it's just mindset, I never used to think about it like I do now. And I noticed such, I noticed myself thinking, I'm so thankful for this moment.
Yep.
Back in the past, it was just like, hey, it could have been better. I'm a little stressed out. Like just focusing on like the bad when
Uh,
there's so much, and when they say like, oh, stay in your own lane, it's a lot easier to do that if you're really content with the lane.
In
Well,
your own lane if you're happy there.
I used to look at people in other scenarios and I would say things like, I don't want to give this person money because I don't know what they're going to do with it. Or I don't want to spend time doing that because they wouldn't do it for me. And my husband was always like, go through life with an open hand. He goes,
Yeah.
don't go through it so clenched up and so close to the chest. He goes, when you give, it's
That's
not about what they're going to do with it. It's about the fact that like
it's
going through life
fulfilling.
more giving and more open to people.
Yes.
And I used to like I came from a more sheltered
Same. Yeah.
and so I was always like, well, if I worked hard for it, it stays close to me and like it's mine, and which it is. You
Right.
work hard,
Right.
you do what you want with it. But life is so much more there's so much more about life.
Kind of related to energy, all of these feelings of keeping things and being closed minded are very low vibrational energies. And it's actually telling the universe what you don't want, which is a wild thing to think about. But with positive energy, these high vibrational energies you can have with giving, with being open minded, with always thinking of the good side of people and that they're probably not doing this thing to hurt me. Maybe there's a reason behind it. Always thinking about those good things and then also practicing that gratefulness. I think that that's so important and it goes right into that positive mindset and the high vibrations. You're telling the universe I'm ready to receive. And I think that that's so helpful and you'd be so surprised at what could potentially happen for you, by the way, not to you, because the universe is going to give back. I think people just have trouble trusting that process and really believing in that. And I think that kind of goes into the like, I don't deserve it, sort of how you talk to yourself. We're always constantly negative in our self talk. So practicing those affirmations as well, like, I deserve this and I can receive this. I think a lot of people are with the closed mindedness that kind of comes along with it is like, well, I don't deserve it. Or like, what if this bad thing happens to me?
Mhm. And it's I think what's scary about being open-minded and more like giving with whatever is that it's going to be
Yep.
the return more long.
You have to be so trusting in the process and knowing that it may not be, and there may be a reason behind whatever's happening, currently. I always say too, like with rejection and things that aren't going well for you too, there's usually a reason for that as well, right? So if XYZ isn't going well for you right now, that's probably because there's something so much better for you down the road. And you just have to trust the process. You do have to be patient when it comes to that. I've
Oh,
always told myself that. Like,
I feel like you had so much good stuff to give out today, and I'm so excited for people for this. And if people want to connect with you, where can I find you?
oh gosh, I'm on Instagram a ton. I have my personal Instagram and then my photography page. So personal Instagram's just my name, Abby Krysiak. And then my business is Abbey Photography. DM me.
Thank you so much for being on, and I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you so much.